So, hello and welcome to today's presentation on recovering from flooding. This presentation is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Silver Jackets. And the Pennsylvania Silver Jackets is an interagency team dedicated to working collaboratively with the Commonwealth and stakeholders in developing and implementing solutions to flood hazards by combining available agency resources, which include funding, programs, and technical expertise. So we bring to this programming here and this entire series here tonight through the Pennsylvania Silver Jackets. And so two of our presenters tonight, myself and Tom Hughes, are both on the Pennsylvania Silver Jackets team. My name, as I said before, is Andrea Carson, and I am the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Floodplain Management Program Manager for the Pittsburgh District. And today I am joined by Tom Hughes. So Tom, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, Tom Hughes. I work at headquarters in Harrisburg, but we work with all the 67 counties. I have the all hazard mitigation planning in my office. All counties need to have a hazard mitigation plan, and communities need to sign on and adopt the plan locally in order to receive disaster funds. In addition, I'm running about 70 projects right now, and we're about to get quite a bit of money for hazard mitigation grant program and the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grant and the flood mitigation assistance grants that fall under my office.
Thanks, Tom. And so while the Corps and PEMA, the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, are two of the partners that worked on putting this series together, we also have been joined in this effort by FEMA, the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority, Three Rivers Wet Weather, Allegheny County Conservation District, and the watersheds of South Pittsburgh. So this has been a joint effort. We have all come here today because we wanted to teach you about the different things that you can do to help prepare yourselves along the flood risk management life cycle. And our goal for this presentation and all the others has been to hopefully empower you as homeowners and business owners to take action, whether before, during, or after a flooding event. And so our previous series have focused on the mitigation, preparation, and response portions of this flood risk management life cycle. And tonight we're going to focus on the final portion, which is the recovery phase. When we talk about the recovery phase, what we specifically focus on is getting back on your feet after a flood. So we'll be talking tonight about the actions that you can take after the initial impacts, including those directed towards a return to normalcy. So hopefully by the end of this evening, these are the questions that we'll have answered for you. What are the immediate and longer term steps you can take to recover from flooding? What do you need to know about documenting and reporting damages to your home or business? And then what assistance is available to help you recover from flooding? So those are the questions that we're really going to focus on in this particular series. Now, the information presented within this presentation is meant to serve as best practices surrounding flooding concerns in Allegheny County, and we'll also be providing you helpful tips and resources. This webinar is not intended, though, to serve as official guidance or instructions, but rather as best practices. So with that, we will get started. Now, many of you may have experienced flooding in Allegheny County before. Some of you might have experienced something like the event that we're showing here on the screen from July 6, 2019. To put you in the mindset of where we're talking about for today, think about this event. The National Weather Service warned of the storm around 4 p.m. They said that it would contain heavy rain, frequent lightning, and we could expect gusts of wind up to 60 miles per hour. Rainfall amounts of up to an inch in 20 minutes were being reported. And around 5:30, the National Weather Service said the heaviest rain had moved out of the Pittsburgh area, but that water would take a while to recede. Flooded roads were being reported across the region. And Allegheny County reported flooding in the South Hills locations, including Washington Avenue, Hopala Road, and Banksville Road. Cars were seen flooded in the area of Route 51 and Edgebrook Avenue, and a flash flood warning was going to be into effect until 8 p.m. on that Saturday. Duquesne Light was reporting 8,500 customers were without power, with about 2,000 in Plum and 1,000 in Wilkinsburg. Other heavily affected areas included Edgewood, Swissvale, Whitehall, Penn Hills, Green Tree, Churchill, and Forest Hills. And this story is from the Trib. So we just wanted to take a minute to say, if you were in this situation, if you experienced something similar to this situation, this webinar is for you. We want to teach you how and what you can do to recover after a storm such as this. So let's get started. When you first are returning to a home after a flooding disaster similar to the one we just described, there are a few key things that you need to make sure that you're doing immediately. So according to the CDC, here are the first 4 things that we want you to pay attention to when you're re-entering your home after a flood. Try to return to your home during the daytime so that you do not have to use any lights. We ask that you use a battery-powered flashlight or lantern rather than a candle, gas lantern, or torches, and we'll explain why in just a minute. So the first thing you're going to look for is there standing water? If you have standing water in your home and can turn off the main power from a dry location, then go ahead and turn off the power, even if it delays cleaning and anything else that you're doing. If you must enter standing water to access the main power switch, then call an electrician to turn it off. Never turn power on or off yourself or use an electric tool or appliance while standing in that water. We want you to have an electrician check the house's electrical system before you turn your power on again. And if you smell gas or suspect a leak, turn off the main gas valve, open all windows, and leave your house immediately. Notify the gas company or the police or fire department, and do not turn on the lights and do not do anything that could cause a spark. Hence why we recommended a battery-powered light earlier. Do not return until you're told it is safe. Now, the next step is that you ask yourself, has my house been closed up for several days? If it has been closed up for several days, enter briefly to open windows and doors to let that air out for a while. And a while meaning about 30 minutes before you stay for any significant length of time. And then finally, even if you haven't had standing water in your house or business, if you have had water in your home or business, then assume your home has mold, and then we'll teach you how to act accordingly following the next steps. All right, so those are the first 4 things we want you to focus on when you're re-entering your home after a flood. Ask yourselves those questions and take those actions so that you can enter your home safely and take the next steps. So once you have entered your home and taken those 4 immediate steps, then there is a series of things that we want you to focus on. And we're going to go through what each of those steps are in just a minute. So when we talk about what's next after those first 4, you can see here a list of items that have been suggested by the CDC. You need to throw away unsafe food, use safe water, use generators and other electrical systems safely, dry out your home to prevent mold, clean up your home safely, and document the damages. We're going to focus on the first 5, and then we're going to spend a significant amount of time on that last piece of documenting the damages. So let's go through these first 5 and teach ourselves a little bit about what we need to do in consideration of each of these next steps. And rather than me do that, we're actually going to do this as an activity. So because there is a significant amount of information out there on what to do for these steps, and we figured it would be better for you to access these resources and see what's available rather than me just tell you, we're going to do this activity. If your last name, it starts with an A through an E, your topic is going to be throw away unsafe food. If your last name is E through J, use safe water, and so on. So what I'm going to do in just a minute is type a series of links into the chat box. And I want you, according to your last name, to review the fact sheet of the topic that you've been assigned. Then we're going to go through as a group each of the different topics. And when we've arrived at the topic that you've been assigned, I'm going to ask you to share in the chat box something that you learned from the fact sheet you reviewed. All right, so if there are no questions, I'm going to enter this into the chat box in just a minute. Let's see if we can do this. Okay, the links have been placed into the chat box. So again, what you're going to do is, according to your last name, go ahead and click a link, review your fact sheet, and you're going to come back whenever I go on that topic and tell me one of the tips or pieces of advice that you found from your fact sheet. So go ahead and take a minute to do that now. Oh, I see. Okay, thank you for letting me know. I know what I did. Apparently I can chat to everyone in the waiting room and there's an everyone in the meeting. Who knew? So 1 second, please. Thanks all. All right, a sec. Okay, let's try that instead. Thanks, Megan, for giving me the heads up. Okay. All right, so we're going to start with our first topic. And that first topic is the throwaway unsafe food. So what I'd like to do now is anyone who had the first name or last names A through E, if you can share with me in the chat box, what were some of the things that you learned about throwing away unsafe food? So while you're typing that in, I'm going to share with you a little bit about throwing away unsafe food and things I think would be helpful for you to know. So throwing away unsafe food. When we talk about throwing away unsafe food, what we are talking about is throwing away food that may have come in contact with flood or stormwater. And typically we're really focusing on perishable items too that have not been refrigerated properly due to power outages, and those foods of any kind with an unusual odor, color, or texture. We are asking you to do this because unsafe foods can make you sick, even if it looks, smells, and even tastes normal. And we want to leave you with this key message. When in doubt, throw it out. And so what we'll be doing is providing you at the end of this presentation with a resource packet. And we'll provide each of these fact sheets for you so that you can have and take them for your benefit. I also see that Joe typed in throw away wooden cutting boards. Exactly. So not even some things that you would think about, right? So when we talk about unsafe food, it's not just, your food, but if you have a wooden cutting board, it's been sitting in water, it might be moldy, there's a lot of things in it, throw it out. So, right. So when in doubt, throw it out. All right. So the next topic that we're going to go into is using safe water. So for any of you who had the topic of using safe water, go ahead now and type into the chat box one of the things that you took away from your fact sheet. And while you do that, I'll kind of give you a few of my tips. So using safe water. Flood water can contaminate your drinking water. Some contaminants from surface water get into the groundwater and affect private drinking water wells and municipal water systems that use groundwater. So if that's the case for you, what you need to be doing is follow local guidance on whether your water is safe to drink. If you have a private well and live in an area with flooding, get your water tested before you use it. Do not use water you suspect or have been told is contaminated to wash dishes, brush your teeth, wash and prepare food, wash your hands, make ice, or make baby formula. So anything that will come even in contact with your mouth, given washing your hands, those types of things, we want to avoid using that water until we know it's safe. So what we can also do to make water safer for drinking, cooking, and personal hygiene uses, we could use bottled, boiled, or treated water for those purposes. Now, your state, local, or tribal health department can make specific recommendations for boiling or treating water in your particular area. And again, we'll be providing these fact sheets for you afterwards with a bunch of other tips and tricks as well. All right, so next up, we have the use of generators and other electrical equipment for safety. So if you had that topic, go ahead and type into the chat box now. And while you're doing that, what we're talking about when we talk about using generators and other electrical equipment safely is that we want you to talk to your utility company about using electrical equipment, including power generators. So be aware that it is against the law and a violation of electrical codes to connect generators to your home's electrical circuits without the approved automatic interrupt devices. If a generator is online when electrical service is restored, it can become a major fire hazard. In addition, the improper connection of a generator to your home's electrical circuits may endanger line workers helping to restore power in your area. So we also want you to be thinking about the fact that ensuring that all electrical equipment and appliances must be completely dry before returning them to service. So you can have a certified electrician check some of those items if there is any question. We also want you to keep in mind that if you do use a generator, never use a generator, pressure washer, or any gasoline powered engine inside your home. And inside your home also includes basement or garage or less than 20 feet from any window, door, or vent. So avoid using any gasoline powered engine inside your home because we're trying to prevent carbon monoxide poisoning from that use. So those are some tips that we're going to share with you there. All right, next up is drying out your home to prevent mold. So if anyone had that as your fact sheet, go ahead and share with us in the chat box what you learned. And I'll begin sharing with you. So if we're drying out our home to prevent mold, if we're really focusing on this in a few steps. So if you have electricity and an electrician has determined that it is safe to turn on your electricity, you can think about using a wet dry shop vac, or sometimes the vacuum function of like a carpet steam cleaner can also work, an electric powered water transfer pump, or sump pump to remove standing water. So we're using this wet vac or a sump pump to remove any standing water that you have in your home. So step one. And we also want to add, if you're operating equipment in wet areas, be sure to wear your rubber boots to ground yourself. So if you do not have electricity though, or it's not safe to turn on, you can use a portable generator like we were talking about to remove standing water. But again, if you use that generator, please be sure that you're operating it outside of the home rather than inside so that we can avoid carbon monoxide poisoning. Now, if the weather permits while you're doing this, open windows and doors of the house to aid in the drying out process. Also, consider using your fans and dehumidifiers to remove that extra moisture. Fans should be placed at a window or door to blow air outwards rather than inwards so as not to spread the mold. And then also, when you think about your home heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, so your HVAC system, have it checked and cleaned by a maintenance or service professional who's experienced in mold cleanup before you turn it on. Because if the HVAC system was flooded with water, turning on the mold contaminated HVAC will spread mold throughout the house. And obviously we're trying to prevent mold. So a professional cleaning can help to kill the mold and prevent that later mold growth. When that service determines that your system is clean and safe to do so, then you can turn it on and use it to help remove excess moisture from your home. We also want to advise to prevent water outdoors from re-entering your home. And so something that might be, for example, rainwaters from gutters or the roof should drain away from your home. So trying to keep water out as much as possible rather than re-entering is also a good way to continue to keep mold from your home. And we finally want to say, ensure that crawl spaces in your basement have proper drainage to limit water seepage. You also want to be focusing on even those small areas and ventilating to allow the area to dry out. All right, so next up, we have clean up your home safely. And so some of the tips revolving cleaning up your home safely are as follows. When we say clean up your home safely, we mean basically the following. 1, get the right safety gear. 2, use teams to move heavy and bulky items, right? You may, if your house is flooded, be moving a lot of your white goods. So your washer and dryer, maybe even your refrigerator, some heavy items out of your home. So please seek assistance for that and don't try to do it yourself. And similarly, pace yourself. There may be a lot of work after a flood. And so being mindful of taking care of yourself as well as taking care of your home is important. Now, there are cleanup tips that you can receive from your local municipality during the time of a flood. And one of those might be that there is often special collection events for certain types of materials. So a lot of the time, what we'll find is that you may be trying to remove lots of materials that you're not normally removing from your home and wanting to pick up with the trash. So this is an example from a different county, but this is how they communicated what you would do with your trash. So one of the things that during an event, you'll hear from your local municipality or your county about how they would like the waste management to be serviced in that particular instance. But you often are going to need to consider the fact that most of the things that you're putting outside may need to be separated in order to be disposed of properly. All right, so we talked a little bit about each of these different steps, but there are also some things that we're just going to need assistance with in the case of a flood. And so oftentimes there are the volunteer organizations after a disaster, or VOADs, that come to help. And here are some examples of specific volunteer organizations that you can rely on during a flood recovery period of time. So the first we're going to talk about is the Red Cross. And so the Red Cross provides a variety of services, such as shelter, food, and water. They also will help you connect with family members if you've gotten separated during the flood event. They have a series of flood recovery guides on their website, which can prove useful, similar to what we're providing here today. So it gives you a series of resources and checklists to go to. And they also can help distribute cleanup supplies. So in terms of how you can access this type of assistance, I actually was just out in a community yesterday, and they were talking about their recent flood events. And I asked them how they had accessed the Red Cross. And what they find is that you can reach out, anyone can reach out directly to the local Red Cross to notify them of their specific needs. However, a lot of the time, what you'll find is that your municipal or county will contact the Red Cross on your behalf. What could be helpful for you to do is to let your municipality or county know of the specific services that you need. So what might happen is that the Red Cross will either hear of the flood through PEMA, or they will hear from the local county or municipality and may ask what kind of services are required. And so if you allow your county or municipality to know what your needs are, if you need shelter, if you need food, if you need certain things, cleanup supplies, that can be forwarded on so that the Red Cross can provide the right services to your community. Now, similarly, there is the United Way of Southwestern Pennsylvania. They provide two types of assistance. They have financial assistance and disaster supply resources as well. If you need help from United Way, the best way to find available resources in your area is to call a 211 help number. Additionally, as I was preparing for this presentation, I found that the United Way also has an online chat forum. So if you have access to an internet or a phone that has data after a storm, you can also chat with United Way on there, and they can provide you resources as well to help you figure out what your next steps are going to be. Now, there are a couple other different things that you can also have assistance with, such as if you have your drinking well water that we talked about earlier, and you need to test whether it is safe to drink again. The Department of Environmental Protection, so Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, their regional offices may be equipped with well water test kits to distribute at little or no cost to residents. So you would contact the DEP regional office to ask them if they have any of these free, or sometimes they're approximately $10 for a test kit to test your well water. And that'll be available to you. Now, what we have done as a resource packet for this presentation is we have provided each of the contact numbers for these different organizations that we're listing. And then overall, I had mentioned the volunteer organizations active in disasters. They're a group that's made up of many volunteer organizations. So it's not just one entity. But what happens in the case of a flood event is that the county or municipality will reach out to the VOADs, and the VOADs as a organization help to coordinate the different types of volunteer organizations that might come into an area. So the different types of volunteer organizations, which include Red Cross and United Way, can provide, again, those shelter services, immediate debris clearance, vital home repairs or clean out, and many more, such as those emergency supplies, first aid, replacement of vital goods. And typically, the access to BOAD services starts with the county. So the county will contact BOAD, let them know that what they need, and then the county or your local municipality will let you know how you can access and sign up for the services. And just a little bit, Tom's going to tell you a little bit about some of the other coordinated efforts that help you access these types of assistance as well. Okay, so I know that my list is not comprehensive in terms of volunteer organizations. So if you have any tips or different organizations that you yourself have experienced or received assistance from, or even volunteer for during that help in these types of events, feel free to share with us in the chat box so that we can add them to our list as well. All right, so with that, we're actually going to transition. I promised that we'd talk about the first 5 things and then spend a bulk of our time talking about documenting the damages. So what we're going to do now is turn it over to Tom Hughes from the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency to tell you all about how you can document the damages and report them so that you can receive the assistance that you need. With that, Tom, take it away.
Yeah, hi. Again, Tom Hughes with the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency. I would like to ask that, yes or no, whether you have documented what you own in your home. Have you done a video for, say, your insurance, for the insurance adjusters? Have you done taken pictures and put them into a box that's waterproof? Those are the type things that you should do in blue sky days, as we call them, so that when and if you do have an event, flooding event, or another event, fire, who knows, from a different hazard, that you actually have documented that and are able then to show that, hey, this is what we actually had there, our structure, on our land, on our property. And then, that makes it that much easier for that insurance adjuster when he's coming back, that yes, you did have that in that place. And we also, when we're looking at before and after appraisals of homes on how that home was affected, say for a flood event, makes it a lot easier when we look at the grant programs on whether we're doing the appraisal as is the day before for that event, so we can give you the fair market value before that event has happened, or even documentation when we can't get the grants out quickly because of the magnitude of catastrophic event, that at least you could show us that you actually did repairs, used your National Flood Insurance Program funds as they were intended for those repairs, and document that as well. A lot of times too, you'll see the documentation is needed by various offices. And Andrea, do we have that slide? Is that the next slide? Okay.
The next slide is high water marks, but you want me to switch to the ones that can assist?
Yeah, I thought we had the one where that has about the different organizations that could show up at the structure. No, that one right there. Yeah, if you can pull that one up. This is one of the things that a number of folks need documentation to occur, and I don't want you to be daunted by the number of folks that may show up after a flood event, but you see some of those are in blue, and there are various folks from the Federal Emergency Management Agency that could be public affairs, if we have a declared disaster. So could be the SBA, could be your zoning officer, your zoning official. And they each are looking at it from a different lens. So Andrew, if you want to go back to the next slide, previous slide of where we were. Okay, and let's go to the high water marks then. All right, on documentation for after a flood then too, we're going to want to make sure that the high water marks are actually captured. And the easiest way to do that is with a camera to show how high did that water go. And I was mentioning that there are a number of agencies that are involved in this to see what occurred in a specific area. That maybe, that digital flood insurance rate map that is done by FEMA, things change. There's development that changes in your neighborhood, and so they want to document, what was the high water mark for an event. And so you're going to see like mud lines or staining on walls and appliances, debris on fences, streets, yards, trees. It's important to capture this information for, as I mentioned, insurance claims, emergency management, but also your floodplain managers. So, this next event, we want to make sure that, we have identified the risk and have documented the risk and changed our needs for that risk. So let's see, how do you spot these high water marks? Next slide. Can we see in the chat, can you tell me where you can see that high water mark? Where did that flooding occur? We still with me? I don't see anything in the chat yet, but I think this one is right above that hinge. That one's pretty easy right there, but we're gonna give you some harder ones here now. Obviously, if you look over to that brick on that previous slide, it's hard to see that watermark, but we had that white lining, so that was easy to do. Let's see the next one, Andrea. Okay, where do we see the high watermark in these two pictures? Can we put that in the chat? Any answers there, Andrea? I'm checking the chat here.
So Lou says the mark on the garage door along with the tree
You got that? Yep.
is garage door mud line.
All right. And is that, can you see a line on the tree? That one's a little harder to see, right? And so we actually have teams, the USGS goes out and they actually, when the state requests a team to come out and do high water mark markings, that's one of the federal agencies that we go to actually document that. But we also need homeowners to document it. We need the municipalities to document that. So as I mentioned, for future mapping and modeling updates, that's very, very, very important. Next slide. Okay, how do we do this? We're going to take photos, we're going to take videos, and also we want to know what scale that is. So, if we have a yardstick or something, a vehicle that maybe is parked next to it, we have at least some kind of gauge to see how high was that high mark. Why document? We want to correlate the storm event with resulting flooding for future planning. And when it rains this amount, then we know what the water is going to rise within what time and to what level. The height of the water is very important in making damage assessments. When we send, the Red Cross does, windshield surveys, your local emergency management coordinator is appointed for each municipality. You also have a floodplain manager that has their needs for substantial damage determinations. So, those marks are important for that community. And it's very important to capture that information ASAP. You get another rain event, washes off the white, it's not as easy to see those high water marks. So you're going to want to do that as quickly as you can, when they send folks back in safely to actually then start documenting the damages. Next slide. Can we see where on the left-hand side, where is that high water mark there? What are you seeing here? Anybody game on that one? See that one that mark across that TV? Yeah, there you go. And then also on the walls there, we look at something like this, and that's on the first floor elevation, as we call it. And yeah, halfway up that TV. So we know that there's some substantial damage there in that home and that structure. And so what we look at, per the floodplain ordinance, if a home is deemed substantially damaged, then we need to do mitigation measures. And so that could be elevation. Sometimes homes, we cannot get them back to their normal state. We're looking at acquisition and demolition. So, we also then have all the damage, items in that home. A lot of times you will lose the, water heaters and the furnaces in the basement. We have dryers and refrigerators that, never, cannot be used again, that have damages. And then as Andrea had showed, the debris, that we're going to need to get that taken out. So that these all come together at the damage assessments done by the local community, the municipality, and then it goes on to the county. County then has a initial damage reporter that they send up to PEMA, our agency. And then, if we have the numbers of, homes that are affected, be it minor, major, destroyed, unaffected, we give those numbers to FEMA. And then that's how we move on to the, to look at whether we're going to get a presidential declaration or not. And then also, we could get an emergency declaration for, say, your debris removal. See on the right there. So next slide. Keep receipts for your insurance claims. I can't tell you how important that is. And also keep your receipts for repairs if they're made. If we then enter into a hazard mitigation grant program that, we've done minor repairs, but we want to get out. We're too close to the river or the stream. We need that, especially if you receive the National Flood Insurance Program, claims monies to show that you use that those monies as intended from the National Flood Insurance Program that you have paid for through your claim, your policy. Keep samples of carpeting, wallpaper, furniture, upholstery. Replacing same for same. So after taking the photos, you should immediately throw away all flooded items that pose a health risk, such as perishable food items, clothing, cushions, and pillows. Okay, mold is a killer. We want to make sure we get, get that house back to a safe environment. And as long as you are permitted, you should begin cleanup and documentation immediately after the flood to prevent the growth and spread of this mold. Check with your insurance adjuster for future and immediate action. So I would say before you do anything, make sure you get a hold of that adjuster. I think next slide, Andrea. We talked about this, but there's also an 800 number too. If we should we get the individual assistance turned on from FEMA, and I'm hoping Bill had update the slide there. There's others that are going to come, as I mentioned, the building code officials. They're going to want to see what kind of damages that you experienced during the flood event, and they want to make sure that they still stay in good standing with the National Flood Insurance Program. Those mortgages, that community enabled for them to allow for those policies to be given, entered into for the community. They had to be in good standing. And part of that is inspections and permitting and the enforcement of that floodplain ordinance. The municipal emergency management coordinator also needs information for the damage assessments, and that can be used for future declarations. Information is collected and reported to PEMA and FEMA to determine what assistance is needed and what we might be able to make available. But again, if you have damages, you're going to want to make sure that that local emergency management coordinator knows about those damages, whether it be residential, rental properties, businesses, those and even in the parks and that those damages are reported. So we get those high water marks, do our damage assessment, and get that data off to FEMA. Next slide. I mentioned about the substantial damage determinations. Again, if it exceeds 50% of the fair market value of the home, we have damages. Or in addition, when you go in for that permit, and a permit is required, they may waive the fee, but a permit is required after an event. That there may be substantial improvement for those repairs and push that structure over the 50% threshold. And those are things that your floodplain manager or your code enforcement officer, whoever is wearing that floodplain management hat, is going to be looking at. Same thing with permitting, making sure you get that permit that's needed, so you can get in there and do those repairs. And the information for substantial damage determination may not be is not necessarily the same as the information collected. Sorry, next slide. Okay, and how do you report your damages? Do you suspect structural damage? Okay, option A, ask your municipality if they're conducting damage assessments, or it could be sometimes the county, or it could be state staff coming in. Seek out a third-party engineering company for to actually look at those damages. Speak with your building code official or your floodplain manager to determine what permitting you're going to need. Seek coordinated assistance through the municipality if needed. And of course, in blue sky days, if you don't have flood insurance, if it rains, you can flood. Look at the National Flood Insurance Program for flood insurance policy. And oh, by the way, there's also the private sector now has gotten into flood insurance. So shop around, see what kind of insurance you get. You have fire insurance, why not flood insurance? All right, next slide. Okay, if your structure is damaged and you're looking to fix it, yes, you will need a permit. And you're going to need to do that. Sometimes they'll do it out in the field. Most times they have an office that's set up, And the other thing too, we can surge to bring in folks to help that floodplain manager, building inspector, to bring more folks in to help with that permitting activity. And you will need to coordinate with your municipality's floodplain manager to navigate this process. Next slide. Okay, federal disaster assistance that might become available. And we need to meet thresholds for these different funding streams. Small Business Administration for loans for residences and for businesses. And sometimes we need a number, whether they're all houses 25 or a mix of 15 for homes and businesses. We may be looking at public assistance, roads and bridges that FEMA has their program there that's administered through the state. And also the individual assistance, if that's gets turned on with catastrophic damages and need for the local communities. There's been a local disaster declaration. There's been a county disaster declaration. We have the numbers that came in for damages. We get that off to FEMA. They turn public assistance on. They turn individual assistance on, and also my program, the hazard mitigation program, they'll turn on if they have that need. And the Small Business Administration, we could have a SBA declared disaster to turn on loans without having the FEMA presidential loan. So here's some of the things that the Small Business Administration loans can pay for, and who they can pay for. And they are federal low insurance loans to homeowners, renters, and businesses. Due to the lower level of damages required for the disaster deck, the SBA is not confined to what the FEMA restrictions are at times. And again, like I said, it does not require a federal disaster declaration. And a lot of times we'll see damages in one county, and the contiguous county may also become eligible for the SBA loan as well. All right, next slide. What is public assistance? You can see clearly on the picture down there to the right corner, there's a road that has damages. You can see the guide rail. You can see the damages to the pavement, the underneath the pavement. Could be a culvert, usually a lot of times under there, that gets blown out. And that's handled in my office as well through the public assistance officer that we have. And FEMA reimburses state and local governments and certain types of private nonprofit organizations for disaster related debris removal, emergency protective measures to, of course, protect life and property, and permanent repair work to damaged or destroyed infrastructure. And the other thing too, usually it's repaired back to the way it was, but there are times that we can go do some mitigation work with the public assistance program and actually do something and build it back better. So we don't repeatedly pay for that same, we call them frequent flyers areas where, maybe we need to upsize a box culvert, and we can do that with the public assistance hazard mitigation funds. And this does require, though, a federal major disaster or emergency disaster declaration to turn public assistance funding on. Next slide. Individual assistance. So that goes to individuals. Provides financial and direct services to eligible individuals and households affected by a disaster who have uninsured or underinsured necessary expenses and serious needs. Here's the list of the assistance that can be included in that, as we call it, IA declaration: temporary housing assistance, lodging expenses reimbursement. Say you had folks had to go to a hotel, home repair and replacement, and other necessary expenses or serious needs as determined by FEMA. But I'm going to tell you, you only get this once, unless you get you need to then also sign up for the NFIP. After that, we had instances in West Virginia where West Virginia was hit. The homeowners, those folks, the individuals needed the IA assistance. They got it. Didn't have the NFIP policy in effect on the next event, and you only get this one time. The other thing too, it doesn't return you to whole like flood insurance does. The most you're going to get is something in the neighborhood of our average for Irene and Lee, those big event, was somewhere in a neighborhood of like $6,000, $7,000. Well, if your structure's hit and you have those immediate needs, $6,000 to $7,000 is not going to return you back to whole, not even get you close. So then, if available, if this is turned on, FEMA actually has a toll-free number that folks could call in to sign up for this individual assistance. And again, this requires a federal major disaster emergency disaster declaration. Next slide. Another thing that we have done in our state is, and some of the other states are adopting this as well. If we don't get a federal declaration, but we say we have a county or two counties, we know areas that have gotten hit. We have set up a multi-agency resource center. And if we do get a disaster declaration, we set up in each of the counties a disaster recovery center. And that is actually a one-stop shop for, say you lost your vital records, say your death certificate, somebody's death certificate, or you needed that, or PennDOT, you need your license, you lost that. We have different places, and for VOADs, different places that you can get assistance, that you can walk from one desk to the next, to the next, to the next, or you can choose which desk, DEP for water test kits and that. So we do set up those centers to help the local communities. Next slide.
All right. Well, thanks, Tom. And so I'm going to wrap up some of the things that we felt didn't quite fit into a category, but we wanted to make sure that we mentioned. Now, heaven forbid, we do not wish this on a flood event on anyone, but recognizing in the area that we live in, there could be a next time. And so we also want you to be considering what you should know about the next time your house is flooding or your business, and what you can do to potentially prevent it. So the first thing we want you to do is to understand your risk level. It can really help you to know how much rain fell that resulted in your flooding. Oftentimes, if a community comes to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers after a flood event and says, we'd like to do something to prevent it from next time, one of my first questions is, well, when did it happen? How much rain did you get? And where did your flooding occur? And so if you have that type of information, that really helps me and other agencies similar to the Army Corps of Engineers help you mitigate for the next time. So what we often will ask is, how many inches fell over what amount of time? That's one question. We might also want to know if you know any of the preceding conditions. So had the ground already been saturated? Was there rain day 1, rain day 2, and rain day 3, which is why the flooding occurred? But we might also ask you, what type of flooding did you experience? Was it that the stream behind your house overtopped and rose and came into your home? Was it that the stormwater system outside your house got full and it was coming out of the grates in the stormwater system and came into your home? Was it that you had water coming in through your basement line? And so we want to know those things so we know what kind of flooding you're experiencing so that we can help you mitigate for the next time. Now, in the case of wanting to find out what kind of event you had, oftentimes you can rely on your weather reports. Perhaps you even have a rain gauge in your yard, or there's actually a beta version of a new tool coming out for Allegheny County by Three Rivers Wet Weather. It's called Three Rivers Wet Weather Rainfall, that can actually tell you what type of rainfall event you recently had in your community. So that can be one of the tools that you have available to you and can help answer those questions. We also, though, want you to be thinking about for next time, based off your experience, what types of preparation or mitigation could be done. We talked about in a previous module some of those mitigation efforts. Perhaps you're investing in flood insurance. Perhaps you're doing your wet or dry flood proofing in your home or business. Maybe you're talking to communities to say, wow, we had significant flooding, not just in my home, but in a lot of homes along this particular stream. Should we be looking at a more watershed or structural larger measure to help us reduce our risk? Or maybe it is that we all need to collectively seek assistance to remove our homes or our businesses from this particular area. But those are some of the things that we want you to consider based off of what you're experiencing and the type of flooding that it was. But next time aside, if what we really want you to think about, we gave you a lot of tips for today. And I recognize that there's a lot of information. So we thought, Tom and I, that we would kind of switch it up on you. And rather than close with a bunch of tips, what we're going to give you is a bunch of just 5 things to remember not to do next time. And hopefully that'll help. All right. So with that, What not to do after a flood or during recovery. 1, do not underestimate the potential amount of damage your home has experienced. Floodwaters can get into the smallest of areas and can be difficult to remove. You might have seepage, you might have mold in a particular place, so leave no stone unturned when it comes to recovery and documenting. And that leads us to the second one. Do not remove evidence of flooding before documenting damage and alerting your municipality. If you're going to get assistance, you're going to need to have documented what you already had in place and what the evidence of your flooding was. Third, do not attempt your DIY projects without, and we'll see if we remember in the bottom line up front from Tom's, without having a permit and without talking to your municipality. We also want to recommend you utilize reputable contractors to help you rebuild your home or business. Fourth, do not wait to clean up or make repairs. The longer you wait, the more time mold and bacteria have to spread. And then finally, do not leave your property or mechanicals where they were last time if they were damaged. Instead, elevate or move them. We want you to think about, if you lost it once, can you afford to lose it again? Right, let's learn from our previous experiences so that we can reduce the amount of cost and damage we have to our homes and our safety. All right, so with that, we hopefully have answered some of the questions that you came here with today. Hopefully you now know what are some of the immediate and longer term steps you can take to recover from flooding. We have told you a little bit about documenting and reporting damages to your home or business. And also Tom went over, as well as I did, on the short and long-term ways that you can receive assistance to recover from flooding. So with that, we're going to go to questions, and then don't leave just yet though, because we have a little bit of a wrap-up exercise after we answer some questions. All right, so if you have questions, feel free to type in the chat box. And Tom, someone had given us a question while you're presenting. So John asked, will the PEMA damage assessment mobile app used by the local emergency planning committees / coordinators be returning or available again?
That's a good question. That is in our recovery directorate now. The initial damage reporter resides there. I know that they're working on the software there at PEMA. That's one I'm gonna have to check in, tomorrow to see, whether in fact they are gonna make that available, the mobile app again. I'm not sure on that one, so I don't know, but I'll try to get you an answer.
All right, John, we've stumped him. So then John says, thank you, Tom. Nancy asked, does flood insurance cover if a tree falls on a house during a heavy storm? It's the rain caused, but not by a stream or standing water. So is that something that the flood insurance will cover?
Okay, so there was a lot to that. Could you repeat that question? Let me see if I can find it in the chat.
If a tree falls during a heavy storm when there is a bunch of flooding, but it's the tree that caused the damage rather than the flood, will that be covered under insurance?
See, okay, we're talking about home insurance versus flood insurance. I can only speak, the National Flood Insurance Program is in my office, and I can only speak to, the things that the NFIP will cover. That one, though, I would have to ask our folks over in the Department of Insurance on what the homeowners policy would cover. We might have to have them look at and see. And there's been times when the insurance department has gone to bat for homeowners and businesses to say, look, you as a carrier, this would appear that this should be covered under that policy. So, there's no clear cut, dry answer to that one.
Thanks, Tom. All righty. So I don't see any other questions in the chat box. So if there's not, we can revisit any questions that come in the last couple of slides. But because this was a homeowner and business owner flood education workshop, what we thought we would do is talk a little bit of homework we're going to leave you all at the end of this series. So first, to start with the homework, what we want to do is ask you, what did you learn? So in the chat box, if you can type something that you learned either from this particular module that you sat in today, or if you even attended any of the others, can you type to us in the chat box one of your takeaways from the series? So go ahead and do that now. A lot of our previous workshops focused on, again, that flood risk management life cycle. So we started with some watershed basics and we transitioned more to flooding within a watershed and what you can be doing to make yourself aware of those. And then we transitioned to more of what you can do to either prevent flooding or reduce your risk. And then just in the past 2 weeks, we talked about responding and now recovering. Let's see. So, okay. So Joe, I love it. Start your preparation before it floods. Absolutely. Number one takeaway. Thank you. All right. Megan says, so many online resources. Yes. And insurance is important. All right. Pima's going to be happy. Pima and Pima are going to be document home in advance, right? So that's not something that we think about necessarily, documenting what's in our home before it happens. But when we think about it, it's like, oh, we're going to have to justify this damage or let them, or if they're going to replace in kind, I want to make sure that I'm getting what I had. So absolutely. And watch the electricity, right? Yeah. So something else as well. So great. Thank you for sharing your takeaways. And so now what we want to do is make sure that you got some of our key takeaways too. So this is where kind of the homework comes in. So what I did was review the different modules that we shared and tried to pick out at least one of the key activities that we asked you to do in each one. And so your homework for this flood education series is to go through and make sure that you've checked these boxes and done these exercises. So in the first module, we had talked to you about learning what watershed you lived in and learn a little bit more about it. So we want you to go to modelmywatershed.org and find out a little bit about your watershed if you haven't already. Then with the where flooding occurs and how you can find out, we think it's, ooh, there goes my water. We think it's vitally important that you understand what your particular flood risk is for where you are. Please take a look at, we offered in that module, floodfactor.com. We offered the FEMA flood hazard layers. There also is the new flooding app from Penn State. So please use one of those to learn a little bit more about your particular flood risk. Then when we talked about mitigation, we talked about a lot of options. There's the mitigation, and then there's the residual risk, which is really what your flood insurance is for. So think about what kind of risk you're at based off of looking up your flood factor and decide, do you need flood insurance? Is there something else you can be doing to mitigate your risk and reduce it so that you don't have the damages? And then for responding to flooding, sign up for those flood notifications that they talked about in that module. Make a plan like they were talking about. How are you communicating and working things out with your family in an emergency? And also pack a to-go kit so that if something happens, you're ready and packed to get out of your house and go to safety. And then finally, a lot of what we covered today really are resources for you or how-tos. So I would recommend saving those resources in somewhere. Maybe you print them off in a file, or you have them saved as favorites on your computer or your phone, so that these are easily accessible for you when you're going to need them. So we want to make sure they're on hand rather than somewhere on an internet that you can't find, but rather, something that you're able to use and take with you. All righty. So with that, Tom and I, on behalf of the Pennsylvania Silver Jackets, as well as its entire partnering team, want to thank you for attending the Flood Education Series. We're interested in knowing what you learned. I know that there's been, if you've registered on Eventbrite, we were asking you to share your insights, feedbacks, and questions with us. So please do that as well. And then we always want to serve as a resource for you at our Pennsylvania Silver Jackets team. And so once we have all the recordings from these and the resource packets, those will ultimately be ending up on this website. So they'll be there into the future so that you have this as a resource as well. All righty. Well, thank you everyone again for your time today. And that concludes our flood education workshop series. Thank you.